This episode of Horror Movie Talk is brought to you by two schlubby guys. Two schlubby guys got together about a year ago and decided they might be gay for each other, but they had to hide it. How would they do it? Go to bars? David liked the idea, but Bryce couldn't stand the taste of alcohol. Meet at church? Bryce was down, but David had a Baphomet tattoo on his shoulder and no shirts with sleeves of any kind. Wait a minute. What about starting a podcast? Okay, seems like good enough cover to me, but what would be the topic? How about the thing that got them the most hot and bothered? Horror movies. Now that the secret is out, how will their families survive? Who will raise their children now that their wives will surely leave them? It's time for the fans to step up to the plate, because our families will eventually fall apart due to our homosexual love for each other. It's time for the fans of Horror Movie Talk to start supporting the show. Patrons, Amazonzers, Shudder lovers, for the love of horror movies, do it for the kids. Hello and welcome to Horror Movie Talk, an opinionated and accidentally funny horror movie review show. Your panel of expert hosts each week are Dr. Bryce Hansen, who holds a PhD in spookology, and Professor David Day, the foremost expert in scare no-nos. New theatrical releases always get priority, but we also review older horror movies, both good and horrible. I'm David Day.
And I'm Bryce Hansen.
And boy, do we got a good show coming up for you today. It's a clip show / anniversary special.
Yeah, we don't have that many clips because we're too lazy to pull them, but it's a retrospective.
It's a year in review, which is what we do. We review. And this year, we're reviewing it.
So the first episode we released was July 24th, 2018.
Yee.
And this show is going to come out on the 31st. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we wanted to do a retrospective of all the episodes we've done and all the lessons we've learned along the way.
All the valuable lessons we've learned. But first, before we do that, make sure to check out our website. As always, it's at horrormovietalk.com. Go there to find links to all of our social media. Also, every review comes out with a blog post, and each blog post has a bunch of videos and pictures, pretty pictures to look at. We post new episodes every single Wednesday, except for this week. This week, if you notice, I don't know if you did, we released one on Monday for Dead Night. Holy shit.
So Dead Night was the third episode
third
that we recorded.
Okay, third episode that we recorded. Ever. So this was recorded a year ago.
I was actually kind of surprised at how much of the episode template we already had down back then.
Yeah, I think that's due mostly to you. You had a pretty good idea for... I had some strong opinions about how spoilers should go and that kind of stuff, but I think you had the
it took a while. I think it took till... Can you hear me on yours?
Yeah, I can hear you really well.
Took till episode 8 or 9, I think, before we really got it nailed down, the different sections with actual intro music for everything. Yeah. But yeah, even just the beginning and end was relatively dialed in a lot quicker than I remember.
So if you want to hear a little time capsule from our early recordings, we did release that on Monday this week. Dead Night. It is a hot fucking mess of a movie.
It's a D movie.
And I'm sad I didn't give it a lower score.
Yeah.
Because
I think I can say that is the worst movie that we've reviewed, probably.
Yeah.
It was a hot mess. Starring Barbara Crampton, so
yeah.
If that does anything for you.
Yeah, whatever. So like I said, we post new episodes every Wednesday, so make sure to subscribe to us on the podcast platform of your choice and review or rate or whatever it is you need to do to give us 5 stars because, we're worth it. As I said, we got a great show for you today. Let me switch gears here. This is not a normal episode of Horror Movie Talk. So if you're coming into this, if this is your first episode of Horror Movie Talk, this isn't the norm. This is a different thing that we do kind of occasionally. We'll do a slightly different format than normal. But this is a celebratory episode. And did you think we would get this far, Bryce? Did you think we'd make it a full year?
I had my doubts early on. But yeah, once we got into the swing of things, I think most podcasts don't make it after like a couple months. Like
that makes sense.
After 2 months, I think after 2 months we realized like, oh, this is a pretty
fun.
big commitment.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of like, yes, it's fun, but like it's a pretty big commitment in terms of
time
and
investment,
getting a process. Like you have to have a process for it to work.
Yeah.
And you have to be on the same page. So yeah, I don't think a lot of podcasts make it to the year point. So it's worth celebrating.
Yeah, for sure. During this special anniversary episode, we will be talking about what we liked and hated about the year, mostly in movies. We will also talk about surprises that we had during the year, upsets and whatnot. And we will be talking about what we have done and what we hope to do in the upcoming year of our Lord, 2019-2020. I got to say, man, I'm a little bit worried about our announcer. Brennan is getting kind of squirrely, man. He's calling us gay and all that stuff. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that. It's nothing wrong with being gay, but, like, we aren't gay and, like, certainly not for each other. So, I mean, I've got kids, you know?
I mean, it's a little confusing because we've never mentioned Brennan before.
I mean, yeah, that can be right. I mean, that sure, but I mean, you don't talk about the help, you know, especially when they're there. Like Brennan, man, I'm really sorry to like bring this up, and I know the limelight is not your thing.
Yeah, he's our announcer and producer, so every time that the levels aren't set well or someone forgets to increase the level when we intro ourselves, that's kind of on Brennan. I mean, I don't want to throw him under the bus.
Not kind of. I mean, we cover for him though. We do. You know, like you're like when the levels aren't right, you know, right out the gate, and you're like, oops, oh fuck, oh shit.
Yeah, I mean,
you say it so that he has time to put those levels up.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a year, so it feels like, you know, we should be able to reveal that Brennan has been here the whole time. And weirdly, he sounds a lot like you, like half the time, and a lot like me half the time.
I mean, that seems, I don't hear it. That's what, like, one of those things where, like, this weekend, somebody in my family was like, "Do you believe you sound that way? You know how you record your voice and then when you listen to it?" I was like, "Yeah," and they're like, "Well, I just can't get over how I sound." I'm like, I don't. I mean, I know what you're talking about, but it's just, I just accept it. And so with a thing where, you know, I hear Brennan talk to me, and his voice sounds different than how my voice sounds to me. I don't know. It's just one of those things, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it is a little confusing that Brennan said our, you know, feelings. You know, what did he say here?
So the horror movie talk started with nervous energy and the desire to work with each other. And to date, Bryce, we have reviewed 53 movies, if you count the bonus episode Dead Night that we released on Monday. 53 movies, man. And then we had...
and we even started out every other week. So it didn't start out as a weekly podcast. The first couple months was bi-weekly.
Yeah, that's right.
Which was confusing to David and I early on because we've learned that bi-weekly means both twice a week as well as every other week.
Right.
That was an early miscommunication. I was like, no, let's just do bi-weekly. And David's like, oh man, are you sure?
I can't fucking do that.
And so we recorded like all these episodes up front. I was like, I mean, we got a big backlog. And he's like, but we're doing it bi-weekly.
I'm so stupid.
No, you're not stupid. I looked it up, and it means both.
Yeah. Oh,
It
actually means
yeah,
both?
it's very confusing.
That's
it
horrible.
means twice a week and every other week. So, anyways, the first couple months was every other week, and then we decided since we have this giant backload,
let's just throw 'em out
probably from our miscommunication about what the term biweekly meant. We just decided to go weekly because we're stacking up so quickly.
You schlubs have the shittiness of the English language to thank for our weekly podcast.
Yeah, so
Bryce is all sick today.
I know. I'm going to be coughing every 2 minutes, and that's why my voice sounds more like Barry White right now.
It's a very strange day because it's late July and it's raining outside and you're sick.
Right.
Which is just, everything's backwards.
Yeah.
I'm going to go down the list of movies that we've reviewed in the order that we've
Let's do every other one.
them.
You say one and I'll say one.
Okay.
It'll be exciting.
Oh, okay. So we got the very first episode was The Devil's Doorway,
Unfriended Dark Web,
Slender Man,
The Meg,
The Little Stranger,
The Nun,
The Predator.
The Evil Within,
A lot of thes going on here. Hellfest,
Spiral,
Puppet Master The Littlest Reich,
Halloween 2018,
Halloween 1978,
Suspiria 2018,
Overlord,
Hereditary,
The Ritual,
The House That Jack Built.
Black Christmas, the original,
We got to get this out quick. Silent Night, Deadly Night,
Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension,
Gremlins,
Bird Box,
Escape Room,
Sleepaway Camp,
Mandy,
Creep Show,
Piercing,
The Prodigy,
Happy Death Day to You,
Summer of '84,
Greta,
Terrified,
Us,
Pet Cemetery,
2019,
The Wind,
The Curse of La Llorona,
Evil Dead,
The Ruins,
2013, Kuso,
Tetsuo the Iron Man,
Brightburn,
Ma,
The Perfection,
The Dead Don't Die,
Child's Play, the original,
and 10/29, 2019,
Annabelle Comes Home,
Midsummer,
The Killing of a Sacred Deer,
Gremlins 2.
and finally Dead Night. Brings us to this week.
So yeah, I mean, just a year and a little over a year's worth of episodes, 50 if you do your math.
Yeah.
This should be the 52nd if we did a weekly podcast and we started a year ago.
Well, there's 2 other episodes in there as well, right? So there's the horrific beginnings of Horror Movie Talk, which is...
Oh, you didn't count those. I count those as episodes.
I count those as episodes, but they're not movies that we've
Right.
reviewed. So that one was like episode 16 or 17, around there, and it just kind of did... It's a great starter episode for those of you who... You know, if you're new to this podcast right now, if you go back and listen to the horrific beginnings of Horror Movie Talk, then it'll outline our tastes for you kind of in horror.
Yeah, it's a good intro to the podcast. I don't think we ever really push it as that, but we probably should.
Yeah.
If you go on the website, I think if you look at one of our profiles under About Us, it'll have a link to it on either one.
Yeah. It's worth it because we outline what we really enjoy about horror movies. Personally, it gives you an idea of where we're reviewing from, right? Because, you know, everybody doesn't have the same taste. Some people really, really don't like horror movies, and some people really, really do like horror movies. And then within that, there's all sorts of different, tastes that are within. And so you get to learn a little bit more about our style in that episode. And then there's another episode that we did right around Academy Award time.
Right.
That was a movie review grab bag. It
was kind of a catch up of the year up to that point and talking about Oscars.
Yeah, like other movies that we like, not in the horror genre necessarily, and other horror movies that we didn't get a chance to review but had watched anyway. And
we've learned that looking at our download numbers, no one really cares about those 2 episodes, so I'm not expecting this episode to take off in a huge way.
It's weird, but I mean, I guess it stands to reason. It's just a matter of taste, man.
Yeah.
So like whatever.
Yeah, because I mean, that's one of the things early on people talked about was what are your favorite movies to get a grasp of what our taste is.
Yeah.
People like lists, especially when it comes to taste.
Yeah, there will be a strong list of what we liked and hated about this year just coming up very shortly in this episode. So, but before we get to that, let's talk about our Patreon page. We are very lazy people, so it's impressive that we got a Patreon together. Right now, we still only have that one tier, the $5 a month tier. That does get you into the Horror Movie Talk founding members list, which means that very soon, I promise, it'll happen. Very soon, we are going to branch that Patreon out into multiple tiers. But if you get in now on the bottom floor at $5 a month, you get to be included in all bonuses that come from all tiers forthcoming, because you're in the Horror Movie Talk founding member list. And so get in on that. It's a great way to support the show. And, we do put out a free podcast, and any support you can give us, we certainly do appreciate. You can also support the podcast by buying anything or renting anything on Amazon. As long as you go to our website, horrormovietalk.com, and click through the green button in the header. And finally, you can support us and get access to great streaming horror content by going to Shudder, SHUDDER.com, and entering HMT at checkout. That'll get you 30-day free trial instead of that 7-day free trial that we just wish would die and go to hell. So, go ahead and head on over to Shudder. They just I believe this week on Shudder they threw in Nightmare on Elm Street 1 through 6. So you can binge like a significant portion of the Nightmare on Elm Street series on Shudder right now, and you can do it for free if you enter HMT at checkout. Also, they got the Critters show, a new binge. They got Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They got all kinds of crazy cool crap. Oh, they got Basket Case, which is a romp, man. Let me tell you, if you haven't seen Basket Case, great classic goofy slasher, very in the vein of Sleepaway Camp.
Yeah, we got to review that soon.
Wacky.
I really wanted to review that one eventually.
So, thanks again for listening, and let's get into the show. What's the next portion of this show, Bryce?
Well, you set it up, so I'm going to read what you wrote.
Oh, okay.
The most hated movies of the year. So is this our most hated or by download numbers?
No, this is our most hated.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not I don't count download numbers.
Why don't you start with your absolute most hated one?
I fucking hated Dead Night. I hated that movie. It was confusing, but it was like, okay, so we had just started Horror Movie Talk. We were so excited to be watching horror movies and reviewing them and writing down little notes about it and being like, oh boy. So watching this movie was tinged with like an unfair amount of excitement.
Uh-huh.
We were sitting at my house with my wife and we were watching it. Oh, it's a crazy. Oh, well, this is weird. Oh, this is bad.
Yeah. See, I think I had a little more exposure to like actually bad horror movies.
Yeah, I think so.
Like just terrible B-level horror movies.
I think that had been a previous goal of yours, was to see very bad movies.
And we've learned that that's no longer a goal. Like I was listening to our original intro and it talks about we like seeing good movies and bad movies so horrible that they're fun to watch. And we've definitely moved away from that because we've learned that it's a real chore to watch terrible movies. So when we have a list of movies that we need to see, I think we definitely deprioritize the ones that we know are going to be bad.
Yeah, because it's our podcast, and oh man, fuck those movies.
Right. And the other thing that we've deprioritized is monster movies, apparently, because we keep skipping the monster-based horror movies.
Yeah. We just did it with Crawl, too.
Yeah, and with Crawl.
That was unintentional. That just happened to line up with, like, my vacation.
Right.
You know?
And we haven't done any of the Godzilla movies.
Yeah.
And that would be technically within the genre.
Yeah.
But But yeah, Dead Night was a huge clusterfuck of a movie.
I can't even really categorize
in terms of quality.
It was a night.
It's probably the worst because it's confusing and it looks bad, and it's just bad.
It's 1990s Stephen King made for TV level bad.
Right. The only other one that's as bad in terms of clusterfuckness of like the
is our next movie that we're going to talk about. I would assume
is. No.
Oh, okay. Go on.
My number.
Oh.
Well, no. Actually, this isn't my number one, but this is the closest to the terrible quality is Spiral.
Yeah, Spiral's really bad.
Spiral was an independent movie that we got sent. And this was another early lesson, which was...
I love this lesson.
We do not want to review independent horror movies. No. Like, there is such a glut of horror movies that come out during the year, as well as a backlog of just classic horror movies that we need to watch and review.
It's really interesting.
That there's no reason to review independent horror movies that you know are not going to be that great.
So let me explain something to our listeners just so that they have a little bit of an idea about like what's going on kind of behind the scenes in the independent horror movie probably independent movie arena, right? If you start a podcast and name it a genre review show, right? So horror movie talk. You're going to instantaneously get seemingly big people, like people who have made things that will hit you up and be like, "Hey man, can you review my new movie?" And you'll be like, "You made a movie?" And they'll be like, "Yes."
Well, I wouldn't say seemingly big people. Like, it was pretty obvious to me that these are.
I'm not. It's impressive to have made a movie, is it not?
Yes, that is very impressive. That is true.
And so, to me, that's like, holy shit! Like this, like independent has a romantic kind of stamp on it a little bit
because independent spans the gap between me and my friends picked up a VHS camcorder and made a movie, as well as like Suspiria,
right?
You know, it's like there's a pretty wide gap between those.
And so you get all these independent directors and producers who are just dying to get some exposure for their tiny movie. And let me tell you, more often than not, the reason it's tiny is because it's bad. I can't say that with absolute certainty, but I can tell you that I don't want to hurt these people by telling people how it is. I'm not going to review I'm not going to get their movie on what seems like their goodwill. Like, hey, I'll give it to you like a month before it's released on Amazon. Like, cool, man, that's really nice. So you can review it ahead of time and give it hype, right? Like, give it a great score. It's like, no, I'm going to give it the score that it deserves, and that's a 1.
Yeah. And it's, being a horror movie reviewer, you feel kind of pressure to be an advocate of the genre and try to hype up horror movies in general. And in general, horror movies are kind of bad. I mean, if you're going to take them on the whole, horror movies are lower budget.
Yeah.
Less effort is put into
acting.
All aspects.
Yeah, all aspects
of everything. And it's kind of turned the corner where studios are investing a little more and taking a little more care in the genre. But on a whole, if you're to average them out, like horror movies are not great quality, and don't in the aggregate,
right?
And I'm including all straight to video,
right?
Horror movies, all independent movies that you never see.
That's a really important distinction because people will hear him say that and be like, "Oh, Bryce thinks that horror movies are overall bad." And your interpretation of overall of the horror movie genre is very different from Bryce's because Bryce has seen the bottom of the barrel and he's seen how large it is. The bottom of the horror movie barrel is massive. There are so many titles that have come out between 1970 and today that you've never even heard of. Some that even haven't even seen the light of day. They've just sat in their box on a shelf somewhere far away for a long, long time. Watch Red Letter Media. They have tons of this kind of weird stuff.
Yeah.
And you'll never know about it, but for the most part, all of it is bad. And that's what makes our show so special, because we focus on at least a little bit above that.
Right. I think focusing on new releases that are in theaters is a pretty safe bet that it gives you a pretty good spectrum, because there are bad movies that come out in the theater that are horror movies, and then there are really good ones. But it doesn't usually plumb the depths.
Right.
Which Spiral lived in. So I felt kind of bad that we reviewed that movie, because the filmmaker actually reached out to us directly and asked us to.
Joe Clark. Shout out to Joe.
And it was, I mean, he was very gracious afterwards, but yeah, we did not like that movie in the slightest.
I mean, it was bad.
Yeah. In terms of the worst theatrical release movies.
Here we go. Here we go. What do you say? What's the worst theatrical release movie that we've...
I mean, I'm looking at this list. You have one picked out, and out of the list, I can't find one that I would even put close to it. Slender Man was the worst.
Fucking A, man. Slender Man was so bad. Oh, man, and that was rough, because it was like the third episode or something like that. Maybe the second or third episode that we released, and it was like, is this what this is going to be? Like, I've seen a lot of horror movies. This seems fucking terrible. Like, goo.
Yeah, that was just a huge nothing burger. I think that movie was also gutted by the studio to make it PG-13 instead of an R, and I don't think it was... It was probably one of those situations where it was barely an R.
Yeah.
What are you looking at?
Oh, nothing. I was just looking at my cord.
Oh, okay. It was just barely an R, and then MPA just said, no, it's a little too much. And then the studio just said, like...
But we need kids to watch this, goddammit.
This movie kind of fucking sucks, so we're not going to do another, like...
Yeah.
Put a lot of effort into it, so let's just cut out...
Let's just cut it up.
All the interesting parts out of it, and all the connective tissue about the plot.
It's the perfect example.
Put that out.
Yeah, it's the perfect example, and it's genius on their part, because it did not need to make sense. All it needed was the name.
Right.
That's all it needed.
It was so exploitative, but also it was like 2 or 3 years late.
Yeah. Oh, like really?
Slender Man. No, I mean in terms of the Slender Man
memeology.
Meme.
Yeah.
It was way late to the show. No one cared or talked about Slender Man anymore.
3 years late. It was like fucking 10 years late. Like, I remember my nephew as a little kid. Like, he's an adult now, and I remember him as a little kid being like, "Have you heard of fucking Slender Man?" And I was like, "Yeah." He'd be like, "That shit's scary, yo." But now he's an adult, you know. So I don't know. Slender Man was definitely bad. Another one of the things that I wanted to mention was there was kind of a doldrums for us, both in terms of downloads and in terms of just interesting movies. And it was February into March, and there was a 4-movie stretch that we did. The Prodigy, which was hard, meh. And then we did Happy Death Day to You, which was fun, but it wasn't anything substantive of any. And then Summer of '84, which was, it was fine. I think I gave it like a 7, which by the books, I think I might go down to a 6 now, just because it was kind of meh. And then also Greta, and God, all of those were just kind of. Just uninteresting and not fun to review.
Yeah, what would you say is the most mediocre movie that we've reviewed?
I
have one that's just like
it's
so mediocre that it's
the textbook case.
Disappointing that you can't get more excited about it.
Yeah, that's The Prodigy.
The Prodigy.
Yeah.
Is the most mediocre, because it's like it's good enough quality to where you can't say it's bad.
Yeah, they crossed their T's and dotted their I's, but like,
to what end?
To what end? Like, on sentences that no one cared about. You know, like, oh man, they could have put a heart for those dots on those I's. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also, man, the Curse of La Llorona was fucking average as shit too, and
Yeah.
but it made me angry for some reason. I think because it felt like a huge waste of time. Like the whole thing was just so like they didn't try at all. Like there was some effort in The Prodigy, but man, the Curse of La Llorona. Ugh.
I don't think I said my most hated one, and this is, we could transition to a new section. The most painful experience to watch and review.
See, but this show... Okay, go on.
My most hated one, and me and David disagreed on it probably the most, was Kuso.
Oh, man. What a breath of fresh air.
No. Did I give Kuso a worse review than Tetsuo?
Yeah, I think you did. Or... I don't know. You really dislike Tetsuo.
I think I really hated Tetsuo. That was the most painful experience because I just couldn't care. I was just like, God damn it. It feels like someone's just stabbing shards of garbage cans into my skull for like an hour and a half.
That's exactly the experience of that movie.
Yeah. And, I don't get the overload, and you're all about the overload, just as like the aesthetic experience of too much.
Yeah, too much. It always has to be too much. The exception to that is gore, like extreme gore. Right. I'm not into that so much.
Yeah, and somehow I am.
Yeah.
That's okay for me.
Man, Tetsuo was grating and terrible, but it was supposed to be. Both of them were grating and terrible, and they were supposed to be. But it also held some genre significance in terms of like...
Because people said it does.
Right, because people say it does. I mean, it's when your movie gets frequently compared to Eraserhead, I mean, you've won. You just have won. Right. So because the whole point of Eraserhead was to almost create a genre like this, like just be upset.
Yeah.
This describes the worst parts of life. And
so that month that we did Kuso and Tetsuo back to back
in one day.
That was the most miserable that I've been on the show. And another lesson learned is don't do that. Like, we have to watch like a palatable movie if we're going to watch a really, truly like challenging or painful movie.
See, that's a lesson that you learned. While I did not enjoy Tetsuo, I didn't totally hate it, but I loved Kuso. And I think this will transition us nicely into the next segment, which is the most loved movies of the year. And Kuso is right up there for me. It's like a 7 or an 8, but more than that, it made me elated. Like, Kuso was all farts and poop and just jokes on jokes on jokes. It was hilarious to me. It was like a really over the top metal album that just went bananas.
Right.
And I love that.
So what is your most loved that we've done?
The most loved movie that we've done. Oh, this is a pretty close 3-way tie, but I think the winner has to be Hereditary.
Yeah, I mean, Hereditary is the reason why we started the podcast.
Right. Yeah.
Because we talked about it for like 2 hours after we saw it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Hereditary has to be like the best that we've reviewed. And it's kind of like the touchstone or like the
high watermark.
The high watermark.
Yeah.
I know the ones that I had the most fun with and that I recommend the most.
Yeah.
To like when people are like, what horror movie should I see?
I think we're going to be the same on this.
Because they've seen some.
Right.
And the ones that I think like I did not know this existed until I started a horror movie podcast.
Oh, I'm so happy.
And started getting into a little deeper into the horror genre. And there are memes inside like the horror crowd for a reason.
Right.
And very tippy top of that list of recommendations is Sleepaway Camp.
Okay, yeah.
That was
that's mine too. For sure.
The most like, if you want to see a horror movie that you should see, that's a completely new experience and delightful.
Yeah.
Sleepaway Camp.
A tragic boating accident. Tragic boating accident.
And the other one that I always mention and doesn't get enough love because it's a seasonal one.
Hey, baby, this
is Silent Night, Deadly Night.
I think Silent Night, Deadly Night may eke out over Sleepaway Camp
actually,
for me.
When I think about it, I did like Silent Night, Deadly Night more.
I was crying.
I think I gave it like a 9 or something.
Yeah, I think it got...
I think I might change it to a 10 because it's so perfect.
It's brilliant. The Silent Night, Deadly Night is the... Like, I think about that so fondly, watching that in, like, it was Christmas time. Carrie was, falling asleep on the couch like she does. There was maybe snow in the air. It just felt fucking perfect watching this movie at Christmas time because it was so weird and like it was such a...
Mr. Sims! Oh, Mr. Sims!
It was such a horror genre recipe, but with this weird care and twist that was put into it. Like whoever made this really cared about it a lot.
Right.
You know what happens Christmas Eve, don't you? You know all about Santa Claus.
He brings presents to all good boys and girls.
Your daddy told you that, didn't he?
Your daddy told you that, didn't he?
And then just in terms of like tonally consistent and just really painting with a really unique color, this movie is amazing.
It really is.
Especially, I loved the part that like pushes it over the edge for me is the songs.
Yeah, I mean, it just demonstrates the amount of care and effort that goes into the whole movie.
Here's one.
On this eve when saints and angels sing among us, holly hung just right, and faces bright with Christmas fever. Happy.
It's so like specifically like weirdly off.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, it sounds so Christmassy. Christmas fever.
What the fuck is that? Yeah, and they went to all this effort, and it really paid off in spades because, it was sleeper in while I was watching it. Like, I was just having a good time while I was watching it, and at points I was laughing in tears.
Right.
But it didn't leave like a huge impression on me. But looking back at it, I go, oh, I'm watching that every Christmas.
Right. Yeah. I'm
sure.
definitely not going to watch Black Christmas again.
Hell no.
Yeah, we'll probably watch the remake of Black Christmas, and maybe that's better. But Black Christmas falls into the mediocre tub for me.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, Silent Night, Deadly Night. I will watch that every Christmas.
I hope I can. It's kind of hard to get your hands on it, I think.
Yeah.
Just recently, it was made available on Blu-ray,
right,
and then also available on digital. Like for a long time, it was just not available at all. So
yeah, and learning about the history of that one specifically, of just it opened the same week as Friday or as Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah,
and it outperformed it,
destroyed it
the first week.
Yeah,
and then the uproar around an evil Santa Claus from like the Committee of Parents of America.
More controversial than Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah. They got it pulled because they hated the ad for the movie so much that it showed a scary Santa Claus right around Christmas.
Right.
That they pulled the movie. And so it never got its due.
It was
in terms of like an 80s horror film, like it's better than most.
Yes. Oh yeah. And
I'm talking of the legendary 80 horror movies like Nightmare on Elm Street, you know, I can't think of any Gremlins or, you know, just stuff that you associate with like these are the tentpole 80s
quintessential
horror movies. Silent Night, Deadly Night is better than most of those.
Yes. And, you know, releasing against Nightmare on Elm Street and being more controversial than a killer dead pedophile. Like,
right.
How'd you pull that one off? But they did. They did. They got pulled from a bunch of theaters for that. We both agree Sleepaway Camp and Silent Night, Deadly Night are absolute must-watches from both of us. Another one that I will mention as like probably the scariest movie I've seen in recent memory is Terrified. Terrified was, I just like out of the blue, I just had heard a lot about it, kind of from some horror subreddits and stuff like that. And man, did it just like, so I didn't have any real expectations and I didn't have any knowledge of it really. I was just like, oh, I've seen this around and it's on Shudder. And it is on Shudder right now. And man, is that movie just a powerhouse of scares. That one really impressed the hell out of me.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what the scariest one for me is.
It's probably Terrified, I would imagine.
Yeah, see, that's the other thing that I've learned about being a movie reviewer is it's colored. My opinion of the movie is so colored by my condition while watching it.
Yeah.
Because I'm very guilty of watching it when I'm really tired.
Yeah, you are.
And I'm just like, I'm just watching this because I have to.
Yeah, you watch
it.
Terrified on your phone in bed.
It's very, very much like...
How do I know that? I don't know that for sure. Never mind.
When you're assigned a book to read in English class,
yeah,
even though it's a great novel, it's like, how much are you really going to enjoy it when it's mandatory to read? And so there's some of that creeps into my opinions of the movies, and I think Terrified was one of those where it was like, all right, this is something. It's very good, and I liked it, but I just couldn't care about it that much. But for some reason, you know, Silent Night, Deadly Night just delighted me so much.
So the other movies that I can recall from long ago, not necessarily long ago, but like movies that I hold in as high tier, very scary horror movies are like Wreck. That's one of them, which is the movie that Quarantine was based on. It's a Spanish movie as well, and that one scared the pants off of me. Also, Paranormal Activities. I'm a big sucker for those. So, I'm trying to think of other ones. You know, like then there's the big ones like The Witch. That one really tickles me quite a bit too. So,
yeah, I think Hereditary is just the one that scared me most.
Yeah, me too. Because it taps into something more than just alarming. It taps into something truly horrifying, which is your family falling apart.
Right.
And you being unable to stop or control any aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real too close to home scare.
I think there's two things about when people ask about what's a scary horror movie or what's the scariest horror movie that you've seen. It's
not a fair question.
It's a hard fight because, number one, if you see a lot of horror movies, you get the tropes and you're not scared of them anymore.
Right.
You know? And it's harder to be affected by stuff that genuinely is scary.
Yeah.
But it's just not scary to you.
It's just a formula that you're so well versed in that.
And that's like the first threshold for me. And you see on the horror subreddits of people saying, I never get scared of any horror movies. Give me the scariest horror movie because I want to be scared again? And the answer is, well, you're just not going to be.
You'll never be scared again.
You probably won't be scared in the same way as you were when you're like 11.
Your expectations are incorrect. Like, you should just go into movies with, like, I want to have fun. Like, just sit here and tell me a story.
The other areas for me that unlock that again is either one, supernatural, or just paranormal stuff that can't be explained and is just kind of creepy. But even then, there's tropes and stuff that it's hard to get scared at paranormal activity movies anymore because all the tricks.
Yeah.
And the other one that gets unlocked that I don't think really goes away as much is once you're a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And you start seeing stuff that's around family or children, that unlocks like a whole new primal area in your brain that really can scare you.
Yeah.
And that's something that I see in younger people that don't have kids.
Right.
They're just not scared of the movies that I am.
Right.
Because they just don't understand.
It's not even that they don't understand, it's that they can't relate.
They can't relate. They've never felt the terror of, where is my child right now?
Oh, yeah. Or
like, he was just here.
Like, here's one for you. Here's one that won't make any sense to somebody who doesn't have a kid or doesn't have responsibility of a small child. Imagine a small person who's capable of running, all right? And they're totally, you can't predict their behavior at all. One thing you can certainly almost always predict, as soon as they have they're free of you a little bit, they're going to try and kill themselves. They're going to run into the street, like specifically the street. Like, we're just talking about the street right now.
Right.
And you go, okay, well, just you hold on to them anytime you're near a street. Bitch, you're near a street all the time, and you have to let go of that child at some point. There's streets everywhere, and sometimes the street is a quarter mile away, and you turn your head for 10 seconds, and that kid is an eighth of a mile away towards that street, and you're like, oh no, I have to save my child from running into the magnet of a street. Like,
yeah.
And there's that movie, There's Something Wrong with Kevin.
Yeah. There's two aspects. Number one, like protecting your child and having it completely helpless and also like unaware of how much in danger it is. That's one aspect of it.
Bird Box did a great job of tapping into that.
Yeah. And then the other aspect is all children are psychopaths or sociopaths when they're younger. And when you're raising children, you're in a constant worry that your kid is going to grow up to be a sociopath and not grow out of it.
Yeah.
So movies like, Rosemary's Baby or The Omen, where it's just a child that something's off about him, and you're like, well, that's like universal. If you're a parent, your child will do something truly like disturbing.
Whoa.
Like, because it made him laugh, and you're like, why did it make you laugh to push over your brother and really hurt him?
Like, he's in agony right now, and she's like, I know. Yeah, isn't it great? And you're like, Jesus fucking shit, what's the matter with you? Yeah. Look at him, he's a little baby.
Yeah, so there's that aspect of what if they don't grow out of it, or what if I don't, despite all my efforts to teach them how to be a good person, that they become the spawn of the devil. That is the truly most existential dread feeling that you can feel.
Tapping into the core of my soul right now. Man, yeah.
But somehow the Prodigy was still just a terrible movie.
It sure was.
Or mediocre, at least.
In terms of movies that I just had fun with, I was just so elated that they exist. They may not be technically the very best, but I'm so happy that I watched them because they bring me a lot of joy. One of them is obviously Kuso. I've talked about that already. A horrifically gross movie, but man, if you're into dark comedy and farts, then bingo, Kuso. Another one is Creepshow, and another one is The Predator. I had a blast with Creepshow and with The Predator. The Predator was the first movie we went to see on release night, so Thursday night before, quote unquote, the release day of Friday. And there was a big turnout, and I hadn't really been a part of that before. And that it played into a little bit. It's also just goofy as shit, so.
Yeah. So these are movies that surprised us? Is that what we're going for?
I mean, yeah, movies that were... so the next segment is stuff that surprises and upsets, right? So things that... even about just podcasting in general, that surprised or upset us. And so, for example, like The Evil Within.
Yeah, I was going to say, The Evil Within was... You know, you can't say it's a good movie.
No.
But it was surprising how much we could get out of it in terms of
hilarity,
interesting things. I think half of the drops that we use on regularity come from The Evil Within, because it's tasteless but also very impressive at the same time.
Right. It's a very and The Evil Within was directed or created by the oil baron's grandchild. Boy, what was his? I can't even.
It was Ayers. No, what's his name? It was the guy that they just put out a movie where his grandson was kidnapped and they were ransoming him. It was the one where Kevin Spacey was the grandfather, and then he was disgraced, and they brought in what's his name?
Oh yes.
The guy that was in Sound of Music.
Right.
Directed by Ridley Scott. Anyways, that the grandfather that character was based off of, the director of The Evil Within was another one of his grandsons.
Right.
And he was, from what I can gather, a rich kid, spoiled, wanted to make a movie, struggled with drug addiction, died, and they finished it after he died.
Yeah.
And he'd been working on it for years and years.
Yeah.
And so it was real. You can see it's a labor of love, but it is also a hot mess. But it's also very interesting.
Very creative and interesting, and uses techniques in it that harken back to the 80s. Like they do some really impressive stop motion that looks just that look that stop motion has that makes it disturbing and also a little.
Yeah, the effects are great, and this was an interesting case of the movie, the script, and the concept are kind of a hot mess.
Yeah.
It's very bad.
But it was also a little self-aware of that.
But you can see that it had an unlimited budget, which is not normal.
Right.
Like, they could spend a lot of money on locations and
sets and special effects. Yeah. And it was kind of self-aware about how shitty it was, too, because it had that character. What's that character? And he was like, they were like, call the police. And he's like, I don't wanna. Like, no, this is why would I be in this movie? Like, ugh. He was just kind of like, he was accepting but hateful.
Right.
And that movie was a surprise to me. If you could stop that'd be great.
I can't. Another surprise for me, a lot of these aren't like blow me out of the water great, but The Wind was surprisingly high quality for me.
It sure was. It had the promise of that. You know how you see a movie and you're like, oh, this is going to be good, and then usually it lets you down. This one did not. The Wind was a psychological thriller mostly, but man, really well done, and had a supernatural element to it that was very hard to shake. You know, it was like, yeah, this is probably just this bitch out there on the prairie being scared, but also, boy, is it more than that?
Yeah, it made me really interested in the
demons.
Folklore of demons in the Old West.
Prairie demons.
Yeah. Another one that I'm surprised we haven't talked about yet.
I'm a sucker for demons, man. Like, demons, I am so interested in this. It's what makes Paranormal Activity interesting. It's what makes The Wind interesting. It's what makes all these things interesting to me, because it's such a vast and just a total evil concept, right?
Yeah. The other one that was really interesting to me that we reviewed that was kind of surprising and unique was The House That Jack Built.
Oh, man. This movie is my most thought about movie that we've reviewed by leaps and bounds. Like, I think about this movie all the time. And I didn't like it watching it. And I don't think I would want to watch it again. But man, is it interesting. And and just it plumbs like your imagination, kind of. It makes you go, and it's such an interesting character piece.
Right. Great acting.
Strange.
Just really, really great scenes in it.
Starts out pretty light.
Super, super dark comedy.
And then goes real dark.
Yeah. And, that ending.
The ending
was really...
The ending is what made it.
I think that's what sold it for me.
Yeah, me too. Once he went down into hell, and he was kind of being led through the labyrinth of the levels of hell. I was just that's the part that I think about, because it brings it all into this like lofty concept area,
right?
Which is like, oh, he was just bad or something. I can't really recall exactly.
Yeah. So what are the biggest lessons we've learned from our first year in podcasting?
Oh man, that's
I kind of want to go like behind the curtain, like for us, what the experience of doing a podcast, doing our first podcast ever, and the emotional highs and lows of it.
Yeah.
I think that might be the most where the biggest lessons learned for me are. Is that we start out and it's mostly for us. It's mostly for a project that we wanted something to do together.
Right.
And we couldn't find like a business to do that we could agree on.
Yeah.
But it
seemed like too big. It seemed like too big of a risk.
Right.
Or a commitment or something like that. But this is something,
yeah,
we could do that.
Do the podcast. I think like the biggest like learning for me is that we figured out how to be a really good partnership.
Yeah.
Like it took a while too.
Yeah, it did.
And there was trust issues.
Yeah.
And lots of stuff behind the scenes where like had a couple real kind of intense heart-to-heart moments.
Yeah.
About expectations, about fears, and opinions of each other.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Or baggage from previous experiences of working with each other and carpooling and whatever. Of being of having a friendship.
Yeah.
You know? And transitioning from a friendship where like it's important, you're committed, but you don't necessarily rely on that person for anything other than companionship.
Right.
And, doing stuff every once in a while. When you shift it to, we're going to do something, we're going to do a creative endeavor every week.
And share responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's really, I'm so glad that we did stick with it and did work through all those things, because now I mean, obviously more of that stuff will happen.
Right.
There will always be arguments and upsets and misunderstandings, but I feel much more well equipped to handle that, especially with you and just in life in general.
Yeah.
I feel like my ability to just go, hey, I know we disagree about this, but like, you're my friend.
Right.
And whatever happens, it'll be okay with us.
Right.
And I'm not going to let whatever our disagreement is about this get in the way of that. And that has been a huge, I think you're right. That's probably the biggest thing, is learning how to be in a real partnership with someone else, right? Like, who's not my wife.
I can't think of, because I see on the our podcasting or our podcast subreddit people saying, hey, anyone want to be a co-host? I want to start a podcast. And I just think of that as the craziest idea. I can't imagine being on another podcast with just some other co-host.
It seems impossible.
Yeah.
It seems like when you know what that seems like to me is that moment in high school when the teacher was like, all right, pair up into groups. We're going to do a 6-month project.
Oh, and you're like,
and you're like, I don't want to get Eric. And then you get Eric and he's just like, all right, so you're doing all this for me, right? That's what it feels like it's going to be. If you just get with some random person and be like, oh, they're looking for someone to do podcast with. I will do podcast too.
And I think it's the reason why most podcasts don't survive after like 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Is that you find out real quick that, I mean, it's fun, but like, I'd rather have my Saturday. and
you don't get it.
And it only takes one of you to say that,
Yeah.
you know? And if you're both not committed to it and committed to each other, then it's just not going to happen. Like, I think the statistics on podcasts, it like 90% of them don't get past 3 episodes.
Yeah, we're definitely in a very, I mean, it is elite echelon, quote unquote, but in the same way that, you know, good horror movies are
Right.
good, not
Right.
bad. You know, it's like there's so many that are dead.
Yeah.
I got another upset for you.
Sure, yeah.
There was a point where we were really thinking about and wanting to introduce and host movies at a local movie theater.
Yeah.
And there just so happened to be another podcast in the area that was doing exactly that. And it was defunct.
Yeah.
The guy who was doing it
Hadn't put out an episode in like 4 or 5 months or
yeah,
something like
because
that.
his partner ditched on him after something like 40 episodes. And so we were like, oh, we got this guy has an in, and maybe he could be on our podcast, and then he could like show us how to do it, and we could start a partnership with him. But he ended up being
a gigantic flake.
a big flaky McFlakerson.
Because he said he was going to come on the podcast, and I think that
2 or 3 times.
2 or 3 times, and every time it just never happened. And eventually he found another co-host, or found his old co-host to come back, and I think they're doing episodes on the regular
Yeah,
now.
it's well. I mean, last I checked, which was a couple months ago, they were, and it was a different co-host.
But they're still doing the monthly horror movie event at Kiggins in Vancouver, Washington. And I mean, that's still something that in the back of my mind I'd like us to do, some kind of live event.
Yeah,
I think that'd be fun.
I think that's the obvious next step.
It's just hard for the time commitment and the like figuring out the logistics of it.
It sure is
daunting. Where we're in a really good steady state with the production that we have right now,
and stage fright too, man. Like you've been on stage probably a lot more than I have, but boy, I don't know. It makes my butthole wiggle thinking about getting up on stage.
Listening to older horror movie talk episodes, I realize how and right now how stilted I am and how awkward I am, but it doesn't bother me while I'm talking. Like if I was on stage doing this, it probably wouldn't bother me that much. You sound more natural, but you would be really bothered if you're in front of a lot of people.
We're very different in that regard. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, which is like if like if I want to do something, then it just happens. Like I just want to do it so badly that everything else goes away. Like I don't have any worry about it. But if I don't want to do something, I really don't want to do that thing more than anything else. I'm terrified of it. Like I recoil.
Yeah, this is specific to networking and approaching people about our podcast. Because every time we go to a theater and see a movie, there's like, you know, not a lot of people, but there's probably like 10 or 12 people that we could say, hey, if you like horror movies.
It's usually opening night, and there are people who are passionate about seeing this movie.
Like, check out our horror movie podcast. here's our card. Check us out. We'll have a review on this next Wednesday. And we almost never do that.
Bryce, and if we do, it's usually Bryce.
And I always feel like it's a missed opportunity, and I always feel like guilty for not doing it. And I don't want to do it. That's the thing. I don't want to do it, but I will force myself into doing it if I hype myself up enough. And if there's presented an opportunity that it's not just me walking up to them and handing it. If you're like hanging out outside the theater and people are kind of waiting for someone else and you're like, hey, did you like the movie? Opening it that way.
You give me the heebie-jeebies right now.
David hates that idea. He's like wincing right now, even like, because he's worried about,
I don't know,
imposing himself or coming off as too self-promotional, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
what
it is.
It enters into like sales speak kind of thing.
You know what it is? It's that same thing where like oh, it's so cool to have little kids because now I get to go to parks.
Right.
Now I get to go to parks and actually, like, I can play on the toys and stuff like that. I can swing on the swing. But if I didn't have a little kid with me and I went to a park, like, everyone there would be like, which kid is yours? And I'd be like, I'm just hanging out. And people would be like, what the fuck are you doing here? And I'd be like, are you a pedophile? And I'd be like, no, I'm not a pedophile. I just like parks. Like, it's just one of these things where I feel like an intruder who's not welcome.
Right. And so that's like, David is much more like out the door and like, all right, let's get the fuck out of here. And I'm more like, shouldn't we? Yeah, I don't want to either. Let's go. But then the opposite example of that is we went and saw Midsummer, and there was that group of people wearing the cult uniforms of like the robes and the flower headdresses. And David was all over that. He was like, hey, can we get a picture together? Hey, we're a horror movie podcast, and we love what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. He was like, just totally...
I was so excited.
Like, just chummy and like figuring out how to do it because he wanted that thing. Like,
I really did.
He wanted the thing. And like, that's just the most I could think of is like, these people probably like the podcast. We should tell them about the podcast. But getting a picture with them was that's my personal hell. Like,
why?
I don't know. Just making a thing happen is hard for me.
Making a thing happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Anyway, so that's how we're handicapped and R-worded.
Other lessons learned. I had something. Oh yeah. So how gratifying it is to see subscriber numbers grow downloads grow.
It's
This is probably, I don't know what's going to happen when it truly plateaus or goes down. I don't know what we'll do with ourselves, because that's basically one of the reasons why we've lasted a whole year, is that we're not huge, but we consistently get more downloads
every month. Yeah, it's an addiction to numbers.
Right.
That's, I mean, and I have that addiction anyway, but when it's something I own, it's like, whoa, oh, wow, look at this thing I did, or we did. And yeah, if it starts, to be honest with you, if it starts going down, it's just really going to poke me into like, okay, what do we got to do? What do we got to change? How do we do? Like, and,
yeah, there's a certain amount of paranoia around that. I know we had down months in February and March of this year, and that kind of sucked.
It did suck.
That was like, what are we doing? And, it really motivated us to try to shift some things around or figure out, okay, what's working and what's not. I don't remember really what came out of that necessarily.
What brought us out of that was Keith. like Keith's blog on Pet Cemetery,
That's right.
just fucking annihilated. Like, by the way, that's another strange left field thing that happened was, I was surfing through Reddit, one of the horror subreddits, and there was this guy on there just posting these elaborate explanations on his thoughts and I was like, damn, this dude is just crazy about writing about horror movies. And so I just sent him a private message, and I was like, hey, do you want your stuff like published on a website? And he's like, I mean, what do I got to do? I was like, I mean, if you just write the way you're writing, I'll do whatever I can to get it on our site. And he's been great. You know, right now he's working on a Child's Play blog, and it's been great to get to know Keith and to have him write for us, because he's super talented in that regard, and he cares a lot about it.
Yeah, in terms of like growth and what's helped downloads, I think that that Pet Cemetery old versus new blog post has gotten us probably more downloads than anything we've done.
For sure. Yeah.
Just from sparking interest in the website. And so that's one lesson learned and this is something that we kind of assumed from the beginning, but was verified, is that the website is actually pretty important for visibility.
Yeah.
Because if you don't put good show notes on, you're not going to be in Google. And if you're not in Google, people just aren't going to come across your stuff as much.
Not nearly as frequently. I mean, it's just going to be a much slower build.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the ones that we see more downloads on are the ones where the post is performing better.
Yeah.
In search. So like, and some kind of ones that are surprising, like The Wind is doing really well.
Yeah, and it's hard to know exactly why that is, right?
Yeah.
Is it which drives which, right?
Yeah.
Because it just so happens that the ones that perform well, we should probably talk about this elsewhere, because this is so like nitty-gritty like numbers stuff, but the ones that perform well are either the ones with like high search volume, right? Which are the ones that people really care about that year, right? So like Pet Cemetery, Us, Midsummer.
Right.
Or they're such indie pieces that any of the that it's easy to rank for, and that not many people, there's not much competition out there for it.
Right.
Right. So it's like either you're doing like a Costco strategy of just volume, or you're doing you're getting so specific into like this small movie that it's easy to rank for that, and any traffic that is out there for that, you're catching a big piece of.
Right. And also a pretty big factor is if it's streaming on the regular. Like if people come across it on streaming services,
yes,
they'll look it up. The ones that what it's like the connective tissue of the episodes that don't perform well. Like I think
people don't care about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of new releases that are just mediocre just are the worst ones that perform.
Yeah, like Slender Man. Actually, Slender Man has a little bit of name recognition, so it's kind of like people are like, what is that movie like? But as soon as they see, like, it's such an easy thing to throw away. Oh, it was bad.
Happy Death Day to You was like a really low performer. Mm-hmm. Like, just no one cared about that movie because, I don't know. I thought more people would care about that movie. I had heard a lot about Happy Death Day before that, but no one cared. Prodigy didn't get much attention. Just kind of mediocre.
The Little Stranger was surprisingly hard to rank for.
Yeah, Little Stranger is like impossible to rank for some reason.
And
that one's like,
you would think it'd be a hole in one.
Yeah. That was the other takeaway that early on is that we've learned that art house horror movies perform pretty well for us. Like new release art house horror movies do really well. Anyways, this is probably boring for listeners, but interesting for us. The other lessons learned is just the movies that we don't want to review. That's maybe what we're taking away from what doesn't perform well is that, well, people don't really want us to talk about mediocre or bad movies, really.
Right.
And we don't want to either.
Yeah.
So we kind of lean away from that. You know, I'd still appreciate seeing a truly terrible movie, but it's got to be...
It's got to be Child's Play 2019.
It's got to be like the amusing one that people love.
Right.
So like Pieces, we haven't released yet, but that's one of those.
Yeah.
That's just actually terrible.
Yeah. Pieces is, but for those of you who don't know, Pieces is an 80s, early 80s slasher flick involving the goofiest bullshit you've ever seen. It's on Shudder. It's streaming on Shudder, I believe, right now. And we reviewed it many months ago. It's just sitting. The review is just sitting in the wings, but very in the vein of Basket Case and these goofy Sleepaway Camp. These goofy 80s kind of like quaint horror movies. Yeah,
I think of the ones that I've heard feedback about listening to, I think people really liked our review of Sleepaway Camp.
I wonder why. Was it because of the tragic boating accident?
Yeah, because it's just fun to listen to. And the other one is, I even heard some pretty good things about Gremlins too, the most recent one we've released.
I think it's because people already hold them in high regard. They're like, oh boy, I remember Gremlins too.
Yeah. I think the last super big lesson learned and gratifying thing is communicating with people on Facebook. I don't think I can express how amazing it feels to have people talk to us.
It's like a Christmas present every time.
About either just saying a simple thing like, hey, I like your podcast.
Yeah.
I started listening, and here's a little thing that I wanted to say to you is I can't describe how invigorating that is and how excited we get to interact with people about horror movies. This is one of the things that I pulled from the first episode. And this is something that you talked about at the end of the episode. We'll be coming up with more episodes to be determined.
Yeah, this is still new to us. So if you have any feedback, if you listened to us, please let us know. You know, we're excited. We're doing this because we genuinely love watching horror movies, and we know that plenty of others do.
Yeah.
Really, I would just be thrilled if I could just get a dialogue going with other people about stuff that I love. And
yeah, and I think that's happened. It's still not super frequent. We're definitely not overloaded by any comments that we receive, and we're not a huge podcast, but, probably a couple things a week.
Yeah.
Talking with people just about horror movies, or getting recommendations, or saying haha, I appreciated this, or this is my comment about that.
And we have super fans in other countries.
Yeah.
Shout out to Magnus. Damn. There's a few. I know I'm going to forget some people. I just remember Magnus because, he talks to us very frequently.
And he looks like an Adonis.
And his name's Magnus. That's pretty. But anyway, we get people from, we had somebody from Bulgaria be like, hey, I love it. And it's whoa, wait, how do you, wait, I need more. And then on Terrified is an Argentinian movie. And, in the episode, we were like, what's the deal with this movie? Why does it have this weird focus on water? And we put it out there, and somebody got back to us from Argentina, and they were like, oh, dude, the water here is questionable. Everybody's iffy on the water here. So that makes perfect sense why this movie would be why the evil could potentially come from the water is because that shit's not okay here. And it's oh, wow. Wait, you're from Argentina? Wait. Is there more Argentinian horror out there? And he's like, eh.
Yeah, I remember talking to another podcaster, and they they on the regular talk on their podcast about hey, we got listeners from Bulgaria or something.
Yeah.
And we're just kind of rolled our eyes early on. But we're totally that now, because it's holy cow, there's someone from,
there's steady
Afghanistan or something listening.
Steady listenership England, in all of the Norse countries, in Australia. There's a shout out to Australia. I haven't heard from any of you, but I know you're listening, so
Yeah.
thanks. I really India,
I think the other takeaway is that there's probably a lot of military bases around the world that
There you go.
people will find us on, because there's definitely countries that have no English speakers. Well, I can't say that, but I would not assume would be interested in listening to an English-speaking podcast
Right.
that we get listeners from. So, yeah, that's the other gratifying thing that we love. I know one lesson not learned is I still haven't figured out that I need to turn up the volume when we introduce ourselves.
Well, that's
sometimes.
Mostly it's Brennan's fault.
Oh, yeah. Brendan, that motherfucker.
Brendan.
Here's from our second episode. This is the first occurrence of this phenomenon.
I'm David Day.
I'm Bryce Hansen.
Yeah, that hasn't changed much.
No, that's exactly the same.
That's a quaint kind of like a little cornerstone.
Yeah.
I kind of like it personally. The unprofessionalism.
All right, should we finish it up with the ads?
Yeah, so we got a few of our favorite ads. I don't know if you guys noticed, but we have a lot of different sponsors that sponsor us at the start of every show, and Brendan reads all of them, and so we just compiled a short list of some of Bryce's favorite, some of my favorite, and some of Brennan's favorite.
Yeah, I've got a bunch. Why don't you pick your top 3?
Okay.
Rank it from 3 to 1. So you're number 3.
We got Shit Show.
Horror Movie Talk, brought to you by the newest podcast on the market, Shit Show. Shit Show brings you 2 dumb idiots talking about stupid shit that virtually anyone could think up. Shit Show leaves audiences of virtually 12 people underwhelmed and begging for an end. Support Shit Show today by clicking through the link to Amazon at the top of their website, shit.show today. Shit Show. It'll leave you wondering if they let just anyone do this stuff.
Shit Show is a great show that I support fully. I'm on their top tier patronage. I donate more than the tier. I donate like $100 a month to Shit Show.
Yeah.
I really enjoy them a lot.
That one, I don't know why that one just resonates with me too.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's something about it, right?
You were probably definitely in a place in your life when you got that sponsor.
Yeah, I was definitely in a place.
Okay, my number 3.
Here we go.
Is I have a lot of box ads.
Yeah, the box people, the big box has come at you hard, and they are offering all kinds of money to you.
Here's the one that sticks with me.
Big box.
Probably the most. Number 3 is...
This episode of Horror Movie Talk brought to you by Blartbox. Everyone loves Paul Blart Mall Cop, and now you can get a weekly subscription box to exclusive Paul Blart Mall Cop swag. Each box comes stuffed with Blart-themed shirts and bobbleheads, along with a copy of Paul Blart Mall Cop or Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 on DVD to add to your collection or to share with friends and family. Sign up yourself or your loved ones to Blartbox today. Enter HMT at checkout to get a free Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 fanny pack.
I don't know why Blartbox didn't take off.
I don't either.
I mean, everyone loves those movies.
It's really fun to hear Brennan say Blart so many times.
Yeah,
and say it with the what do you call it? Blart box, right? Mm-hmm. So it's 2 B's together. Mm-hmm. What do you call
alliteration?
That? Alliteration. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say a monthly subscription box that delivers the same 2 movies to you over and over again, in addition to other swag, but it's the same movie every time. I guess that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
But you want to share it with your friends and family.
Right.
So,
yeah, maybe it's just a one-off subscription box or a 2-off subscription box. So my second favorite, so we did my third favorite, which was Shit Show. My second favorite is, what was my...
Stand Down.
Oh, yeah. These guys are great. if you're a fan of stand-up, sit-down desks, stand-down desks are what you should check out. This is my second favorite.
This week's episode brought to you by Stand Down Desks, the stand-up, sit-down desks that will make you wonder why you ever thought you could stand at a desk. We've all seen trendy hipster companies with skinny, beautiful people standing behind desks that are 4 feet off the ground. Well, now you can believe that you can stand behind a desk and look that good too with Stand Down Desks. Experience the shame and self-loathing that comes with standing for 20 minutes before admitting defeat and pressing the oversized down button to put your desk at a normal height. You know, the height where you sit, you fat piece of shit. Stand down, the only way to admit defeat. Visit sdd.com and enter HMT at checkout to admit defeat today.
That's so real. It almost hurts me.
Yeah.
It's because I have one of those at work, and it is not always in the up position. It is frequently in the down position.
Yeah.
I really like the feature on the stand-down desks, which is the oversized down button.
Yes.
I mean, it's just basically like you can karate chop it.
And I think it like has the dump truck beeping up sound on it. Just so everyone in the office knows that you're not really a stander.
Is that a stand-down desk?
Yeah. The desk that we record at, or that I'm sitting at while we record, is a sit-stand desk.
Holy shit, I didn't even know that.
You didn't even know that? It took me... It's probably been broken. It had been broken for like 5 months before I realized it. Like, it's not really working well. Okay, my number 2 is...
I've never seen that in the up position.
Yeah. My number 2 is this one, and I think we've actually used this twice. It's one of my favorites.
Okay.
This episode of Horror Movie Talk brought to you by Beats, Mother Nature's oldest prank on humankind. Straight from the ground to your table, to your stool. Nothing makes you relive the past 24 to 48 hours quite like Beats. Introducing unsuspecting millions to the existential dread of internal bleeding since time immemorial. Buy Beats today at your local grocer.
Beats is truly nature's cruelest prank.
Yeah. Beats was great. I think I love that because while Brennan was reading it, I think we were really laughing at his delivery. He'd really...
Beats!
There's a lot of like failed takes of Brennan saying beats.
You goofball guy. Don't look at me like that. You you're a crazy fuck.
Okay, what's your number 1?
My number 1 is when Neverland Ranch sponsored the show. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or Finding Neverland.
Finding Neverland, the documentary. Yeah.
Yeah.
This show brought to you by the new hit documentary, Leaving Neverland. Experience the childlike joy and wonderment that only Michael Jackson's legendary Neverland Ranch, coupled with his childlike hospitality, can bring. Endure the love that only the King of Pop could bestow upon the supple skin of young men. Madonna had this to say about the film. I don't know. I haven't seen the film, but I guess it would be people recounting actual events, but then, of course, people sometimes lie. Right. Because grown men so commonly talk about how an older man stared into their butthole as children while jacking off. At the end, you'll be so glad you got to leave Neverland, you might forget that some people never get to.
I'd just like to point out that those were Madonna's actual words.
Yeah.
You heartless bitch. Like, don't get me wrong, I love your music and stuff, but you are a bad person, objectively. Watch the documentary. Not to say that this is an actual crucifixion of Michael Jackson, but
yeah,
boy,
it's alarming how much that I still see. Just collectively, everyone's kind of still turning turning away from it. Because I definitely still hear Michael Jackson songs on the radio.
Oh yeah, boy, can he dance!
Every time I hear it, I think of Finding Neverland. I'm like, I can't really love this
the way I did before.
The way I did before.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 1, and this is a rare rare occurrence where extra production is brought into it. So bravo, Brennan.
Good job, Brennan.
This is Catbox.
This episode of Horror Movie Talk brought to you by Catbox, a subscription box that delivers a new kitten to your doorstep every month. Experience the joy of kitten ownership over and over again. Or give the gift of kittens. Are you always wondering what birthday gift you should buy your reclusive aunt that smells like ammonia? Well, wonder no more. Listen to this satisfied customer of Catbox.
I love my Catbox!
Go to pussylife.biz to sign up today. Use the coupon code HMT at checkout to get free air holes.
Brendan really caught the franticness of a house that's filled with cats.
Right. Well, I mean, that was recorded live in an actual customer's house.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Like all the feet moving around, you could just hear all the...
And that's probably the best
Tussles.
deal for our customers, to get air holes put in the actual box.
I mean, yeah, it depends on what your purpose for Catbox is, right? Because if your purpose is to love the cats, then you definitely want the air holes. If the purpose is to like feed your pet python, maybe no air holes.
Right.
So
those are my top three. I've got a couple. I've got several also rans that are of note that aren't my favorite, but I wanted to bring up.
do them.
Here's one of yours that we pulled.
One of
I know this is one of your favorites.
Okay.
Maybe not in the top three. Maybe this was the top one, but you forgot.
Horror Movie Talk is brought to you by the Pan Inverse Phase Detraction by Switch. Switch has done their due diligence when it comes to customer satisfaction in the electronic Wingle timing loss arena, and their new product, Pan Inverse Phase Detraction, really scratches that itch and leaves customers saying, "Boy, I don't even miss the flapping ion transmissions." Quality reactive current is altered and modulated to unilateral flip-on cardinal gram meters. With the advent of turbo encabulation, we have really reduced the psionic viscosity of vulvodonic pre-famulated ambulonic Tristo-Pan wind casings. Pan Inverse Phase Detraction by Switch, when you absolutely need to know what's going on.
That is a well that will never run dry.
Yeah.
It's a very Pan Inverse Phase Detraction is one of those things that's just, it's a gift that keeps on giving. Mm-hmm. And there's another commercial by a similar company earlier in our run.
Yeah, it was like the additive
Pandextrosity, or something like that. They start with pan a lot.
Yeah, which in Latin means all, right? Or universal, or something. It's all inclusive.
Brendan,
okay.
Look that up.
Here's one of my favorites.
Okay.
It was really hard for Brennan to deliver this one.
Okay.
But I think it's one of our best products that we've advertised.
Pushed.
Taglines is being brought to you by one of our sponsors, Manxy Pads.
No. It's Manxy Pads.
Mansky Pads.
No. Manxy Pads.
Mang.
It's like maxi pads except with man in front of it.
Mansky Pad. Man.
We'll fix it in post. Go ahead.
Okay. Manxy Pads. Keep your taint fresh and dry for the ladies with Manxy Pads. I started using Manxy Pads, and I'm never going back.
Manxy Pads.
Mansky Pads.
Manxy.
Man.
No, just go ahead.
Get a taint as dry as a baby's forehead with Manxy Pads.
Perfect.
It lifts and separates your taint.
I forgot all about Manxy Pads.
Manxy Pads?
Manxy
Pads.
Manxy Pads.
Manxy Pads.
They had some great copy on that one.
Yeah.
You know, they're...
it's just a hard product to say. That might be why it didn't take off. But really, it's a product that's needed.
It is.
My taint is...
Dude, it's
just a jungle.
It's like a swamp now. Right now.
So that's a good product. Didn't take off just because terrible name. Manxy Pads. Well, it's easy for me to say.
Yeah.
I don't know what's wrong with Brandon.
He's overloaded.
one of my favorites is whenever Brennan, really puts on the accent, and this is one of those that I'm really proud that we sponsored.
Today's tagline is brought to you by Ruble Shave Club. You don't need fancy speed-themed multi-razor. Shave Soviet way with USSR surplus razor. Why waste 98.5 cents on competitor product with redundant blades and capitalist agenda when our razor just as good? Just rub off rust on state-issued pants and wet with vodka. Is good enough. Sign up for Ruble Shave Club today. Is mandatory.
It is mandatory.
I mean, it is. I mean, Brennan, it is a little culturally insensitive, but I mean, I appreciate the effort.
We don't have many listeners in Russia, but if we do, I do apologize. But that is the agenda of Ruble Shave Club.
Yeah.
They were specifically asking for, that accent, and we obliged.
That's true. They only accept rubles, though, so you got to get here.
Yeah, you got to get down to the
transfer.
exchange.
And it has to be mailed in snail mail every month.
I mean, or you could just allow them access to your intranet, They're all over that one.
Yeah.
They're really up with that. But I mean, that comes with certain risks. Mm-hmm. Also certain rewards.
And they have like a really, really deep discount for government workers.
Yeah, I've heard that. I can't confirm it. A lot of those people end up going missing pretty quickly, or or vacations. Maybe they're just on long vacations in the dirt.
Maybe they just got after they're so clean shaven with Ruble Shave Club's razors, they just get promoted or find an outside job in the civilian world.
It's like that. It's like that SNL shaver that they were selling on SNL, where the first 3 blades take away, the stubble,
right,
and then the 4th and 5th blade take away that pesky layer of skin, and then the 6th and 7th or 8th or 9th blade start chipping away at the bone.
Right. Yeah.
And so eventually the idea is just shave yourself away.
Yeah.
You're gone.
Lots of other ads, lots of other great sponsors that, we don't want to be one of those places that just stuffs our show full of ads, but, we love having great sponsors, and
I think it keeps our listeners, I think it piques their interest early on.
Yeah.
I think that's...
Well, we have we do a really good job of targeting our listeners. Like they're only ads that you're going to care about.
Right.
I mean, we have a lot of, people that are arsonists and Paul Blart Mall Cop fans and, and have sweaty taints.
Yeah. You wouldn't believe the amount of listeners we have that have sweaty taints.
That is the most common comment that I have on social media is thank you so much for Manxy pads, that it's changed my life. My taint is drier than a desert.
My rash is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big relief off of people's taints. So I will say this, if you enjoyed today's episode, you will flippin' love our Patreon podcast, which is called the Afterpod, and almost every single time we record every single week we release a Patreon Afterpod. So hop on over there, pay the $5, or if we're into tiers now, hop on a tier and get access to the Afterpod, because we just leave the mics running and talk about our day, and usually we try and throw in 1 or 2 really interesting, funny, or scary, weird stories about our lives. So
yeah. Thank you so much for being a listener of Horror Movie Talk.
A whole year.
Yeah.
That one guy, whoever you are.
Please, I know this was a little self-indulgent for an episode, but it was something that we needed to celebrate. And I hope there's some listeners out there that are celebrating with us.
Yeah.
Because you've helped us grow. You've supported us. You've talked with us, shared the love of horror, and shared the bemusement about terrible horror movies.
I'm looking forward to another year of hilarious and scary movie reviews.
And please share the podcast with a friend. That's the one thing we can point to that is helping us grow.
That is the way we grow.
Keeps us motivated. Again, July, so far, even before releasing this episode, is our best month ever.
Yeah.
In the history of the podcast. So we want to keep being able to say that. So please share the podcast with a friend and leave a rating on iTunes. If you're an iTunes person, or I guess it's called Apple Podcasts now.
I don't know.
I keep calling it iTunes, but it's been Apple Podcasts for a while.
It has it because mine on my computer still says iTunes. I type in iTunes to get to it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, do that. We love you. We really appreciate being around for a year, and we really appreciate any support you guys can give us, or just talking to us. We really do appreciate that. So with that, this is David Day and
Bryce Hanson
signing out for 1 year of horror movie talk. Here's to the next year. Cheers, guys. Bye. Mwah. 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 Tom York and Bjork are on a collision course, and the
Okay, let's start that again.
I love the idea that Dom Hall looks so much like Tom York to me. It's ridiculous.
No way, man.
Oh man, he looks just the same, and the lead actress looks just like Bjork. To me, I was just like,
that is a bizarre. I could not disagree more.
Okay. Well, I mean, your favorite band ever is Radiohead.
Right.
But how could you? They're both gingers. They're both British.
Tom York is not a ginger.
He's not a ginger.
He is not a ginger.
We'll agree to disagree.
Absolutely not.
Agree to disagree. You know, I mean, this is just one of the... there's no way to know, is what I'm trying to say.
All right. Anyways, we'll accept the premise of your tagline and proceed.
Tom York and Bjork are on a collision course, and the only road to redemption is through the house that Hall built. Join us this summer for The Little Stranger. Hall, wasn't the house named Hall?
No, it's
Hall
called,
House?
It's called Hundreds Hall.
Hundreds Hall? I thought it was Hall House.
No. So that...
It ruined my whole tagline.
There's many things that ruined that tagline.
That was I won't stand for these wild allegations.